Hello and welcome to my channel. I thought today I'd try something different. I'm always experimenting and I'm not always successful, I'll warn you of that. And today I thought I'd try to do impasto roses. I could not find my palette knives, they're in storage somewhere, but I sent off for this set from Amazon. It cost me about $9 including tax and free shipping because I have Prime. And they're all quite nice in wooden handles and the tips are flexible, which is important when you're palette knife painting. And so I thought I'd give it a try. I usually use a commercial modeling paste. I won't name the brand. They don't pay me anything to do that. So, but you can find them in Michael's, Walmart, just about anywhere will sell a tub of modeling paste. And mine is lost in storage somewhere. So I used cornstarch, which works almost as well. It doesn't mix quite as nicely. You do have to do a lot more, you have to put a lot more effort into mixing it up. But it works. It thickens the paint. It gives you a nice impasto effect, as you will see. First though, I decided to paint a background with my usual palette of titanium white, primary yellow, raw sienna, raw umber, French ultramarine blue, sap green and alizarin crimson. And I used a 3/4 inch flat brush to do this. And I usually just use the French ultramarine blue, primary yellow, but I think in this case I also used raw umber and alizarin crimson and some sap green, obviously. I use a crisscross motion to apply the paint and then I blend it. I buy my blending brushes from the dollar store and I get the powder brushes, which are about $1, $1.25 each, and you can buy a number of them because they are so cheap. And you have to put them in the water as soon as you've blended an area, and so it makes sense to have a few of these around. And that gives me a soft background, which I like to paint on. Some people like more texture, and I do apply more texture in this case because I'm doing an impasto painting. And but I start off with this blended soft background. I should say too that once I've got my colours on there, I apply titanium white because I like the softness that gives my background. It blends out the colours into a sort of greyish, well, maybe it's more colourful than grey, but it gives it that sort of misty value that I like. I just continue with a crisscross motion. It's not difficult, and I usually start with the lighter areas and work my way through down to the darkest areas so that I don't have to change brushes. Sometimes I do use a fresh brush when I'm getting to darker areas or different colors and I don't want to blend it too much. But in this particular case, I used the one brush. Now, I've got to say this is all an experiment. I've only ever worked with a palette knife once before. I did do roses that time too, and I remember they turned out quite nicely. And I used Pyrrole Red, I think it's called, and I mixed it with the cornstarch, and it gave me quite a nice buttery thickness, sort of softened butter. That's the idea. And I used a quite flexible, long palette knife to do this. And I made the shape of the roses. And at this stage, I think they look quite rose-like. As I go on, you'll see that I add highlights with a brush. And although using the brush with the thickened paint was quite a nice effect, I thought. It did take away from using the palette knife to put on those thickened, roughened strokes. So the final roses didn't look anything like this. But I want you to look at these because I think these look quite rose-like. I'm quite happy with them at this point until I decided they needed more shadow and highlight. And I won't say I messed it up. I just made it different, that's all. I found it very hard to get anything fine, like the stems using the knives. I really haven't got the technique down. I'll have to watch a lot more videos to do that. And my hand's getting in the way here, so you don't see what I'm doing very clearly, and I apologize for that. But I don't think, I like the shape of some of these roses. I like the way this one turned out. But I can't say that I have enough expertise to show anyone else how to do this. You just have to sort of take it as you find it and decide whether you can do this better, have a better idea of how to use these knives. And I have to practice more. Now, I don't think that's too bad for basic rose shapes. I've got 3 roses and 3 buds. And I decided at this point that I needed highlight and shadow, obviously. And I don't know why, I can't remember why I decided not to use the knife to put that on with. And I couldn't do the sepals very well, and I couldn't do the stems. I think I was exasperated and decided, you know what, I'm going to move to a brush. I just wasn't happy with what was going on at this point. I really, really need to practice. See, I can't get that stem how I want it. So I think it's around here that I break out the brushes, and I do use the impasto paint. I think the highlight and shadow were not thickened paints. I just picked up as much as I could of the paint and plastered it on. It was quite crude. And I'm really messing it up here, I can see. I tried doing leaves. I just don't handle these palette knives very well. I need more practice, obviously. I'm trying a longer, thinner one to see if that helps. And I don't think it does. Rose leaves grow in groups of 3, and you can see that I'm having trouble getting even a leaf shape out of it. Yeah, I just have to practice more. Although I'm not even sure this is anywhere close to my style. Like, it has a sort of nice abstract quality, really. I'm trying to convince myself it's got some merit somewhere. I really like the rose shapes, although there's no highlight or shadow on them. So they're kind of matte. But I like the roughness, the thickness of the strokes, and I'm trying to put a highlight on these leaves now. This is not working, is it? At this point, I've given up on the palette knives and I'm trying to add some shadow using a 1/4-inch flat brush and some alizarin crimson, which is transparent. And you can sort of use it as a glaze. You can do that with either the alizarin crimson or both the French ultramarine blue. They're both transparent and they add a nice sort of shadow to things, and the color underneath sort of comes through, glows through, if you know what I mean. I think that's beginning to look a little better, don't you? Please, if you want to give your opinion, leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd be happy to hear and to answer if I can help in any way, although I'm so inexperienced at palette knife painting. I don't know if this is of help to anyone, except to see that eventually you can get something out. Even if you mess up a painting, you can eventually get something out at the end of it. Adding some titanium white. I'm adding a touch of pink to the very tips of the petals, trying to get a little highlight on there. And I'll probably go even lighter as I go on. I'm a bit cautious when I paint, and I sort of add things and then let it dry, because it usually dries slightly darker, and then go back and add extra highlight if I need it. I don't usually have any problem with the shadow, but highlights I'm always sort of working on throughout the picture. I add one color, it dries darker, I come back and reinforce it slightly. And I'm using a slightly wider brush now and putting in more defined petals. And it does take away from the palette knife effect. I don't know if I like the finished roses as much as I would have if I had left them alone, let them dry, and then come in with some glazing and sort of put in my shadows and highlights that way. But the finished picture is quite nice on its own merit, I think. I added a few more petals too. I decided I needed to make some sense of these petals. I'm adding a shadow and redefining the leaves a little better. I'm pulling the stroke in from the outside edge in toward the vein of the center of the leaf when I do this. Actually, I'm just splodging leaves on at the moment. And I'll add the shadow and the highlight as I go along. It all looks a little, I don't know how you describe it. It looks a little messy at the moment, I feel. You know, not every painting is straightforward. Some days you have a struggle, and this is obviously one of them for me. I'm doing something a little different to what I usually do, and it doesn't come automatically to me. I have to fight it through to get something out at the end that I'm fairly happy with. It looks quite abstract, I think, at this point. And I like that effect. I haven't put any stamens in. I haven't really got my highlights and shadows well defined. But it's got a nice sort of weird, rough shrub rose quality to it that I like. I think I might be happy with it as it goes along. Another thing about this painting is that I usually put more colour on my stems. I'm putting thorns in, one on opposite sides alternately, and even the thorns are not as refined as I usually make them. I must have been very discomforted by this whole palette knife thing. It's thrown me completely, and this painting, I feel, although I quite like the finished work, is not my usual work, I've got to say. I'm using a rigger or liner brush, and I'm going to put the sepals in on the rosebuds, and I use that often for the stems as well. I don't think I did in this case. And the sepals, you usually have 5 sepals on a rosebud, excuse me. And I try to make them sort of interesting looking, not all too much the same. I sort of make them a little wiggly and weird. I try to make every single part of the painting something interesting to look at. If you're looking at the stems, I want you to see a lot of colour and form. And if you're looking at the stamens, I want you to see more than one colour in there. In this painting, I was so disturbed by trying out something new that I only used alizarin crimson for the stamens, and I didn't put any other colour in there at all. And you can see it if you look. The stamens just don't look as interesting as they usually do. I'm sorry if you can hear my dogs barking. Something's going on outside. I use this liner brush to adjust the thorns as well, which appear on alternate sides of the stems. And I was a little tired by this time. It had been quite a struggle for me, I've got to say. And I don't think I did the thorns as well as I usually do. And I was sort of glad to finish this painting. I was very tired by the end of it. I had to have a nap. And I don't think I took time to have tea and just sit and stare, which is something else I usually do when I'm painting. I think I was just struggling through it. But it's good for you, isn't it, to have a little struggle sometimes, to do something that you're not totally comfortable with. You always learn from it, don't you? I learned that I need to practice. I put a touch of pink on the leaves. You see that sometimes, don't you? The leaves are sort of got other colours in them. They're not totally matte green. They've got hints of brown and yellow and dots of things that are eating them and little pink bits, and they're more interesting just than a plain green leaf. You have to look at them a little bit. And I ended up putting the stamens in with alizarin crimson. I didn't make a huge fuss of that, and I repainted the background a little bit, made a few mistakes on that. And here in particular, I had to go back in and blend it again. Usually I leave my backgrounds alone once I've painted them. I don't mess with them at all. In this case, I felt that the background needed a little more interest. Mistakenly, I think I could have left it alone and it would have been fine. But there you go. We learn, don't we? This just was not a good painting day for me. I kind of liked the painting that I ended up with, but I don't think it was one of my best. I hope you get something from this video, if only how not to do things. I mean, we all need that video too, don't we? So I wiped it out with paper towel, and then I just went in with a brush and sort of tried to make sort of leaf shapes in there. That's what I did. I should call this video How Not to Paint Roses, and how not to mess up your background, or perhaps how not to paint with palette knives. I don't know. Could be. It's a bit negative. I'm getting a bit grumpy about the whole thing now. Well, that's what I did. I went back in and tried to sort of blend it out with some yellow. Try to make it look like a sort of something was happening in the background there. Something that you wouldn't mind, you know, because I couldn't get it back to how it was. Perhaps if I'd added titanium white. I just put some leaf shapes in and sort of hoped that would fix it. Well, I'll spare you the last of my rose ramblings and leave you with the final picture, which I hope you'll like. It's not my usual roses, it's not as refined as they usually are. It has a roughness to it, and I like the thick paint. I think I'm going to practice that a little more. You'll just have to bear with me because, I get into these things and I have to figure it out. And I'm going to do it on video. So I hope you got something from this video. I know I did. And thank you very much for watching. And I'll see you next time with probably something less painful, we all hope.